Guess who's like actually on time for a reading stream? It's me. Hello. Oh my god, scary. We got two. Oh god, there's a double here. Double boy. He's not a double. He's actually been very good today, my Muppet. Right now he's staring at me from his bed, but that's not new. We had a big play. We had a big like 30-minute play today, so he's I'd say he's tuckered out, but I'm pretty sure he wants more play. But he's being very good and relaxing and lying down. But thank you for the 30 months, Mantis. That's scary. That's so many months. That's so many months. Oh my goodness. But I hope you're having a good day. We're going to be reading more Frankenstein. Whoa, what happened the last time on Frankenstein? Thank you everyone for asking me. So Victor Frankenstein left to England to talk to some researchers to get more information on the topic because he agreed with his monster to make him a wife. So he's like, I'm gonna spend like 2 years in England. I'm gonna get this made and done, and then I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna marry my cousin. This was written in 1818. But after he goes to England with Clerval, they have like a couple of adventures. He's kind of moping the whole time because he's like, oh god, I gotta do this thing. And then he goes off by himself and goes to an island in like Scotland with like 3 other people on it. And he makes the bride and he's really unhappy about it. And then as he's finishing her up, he looks out the window and sees his monster who had followed him there to make sure he was, doing the thing. And he's like, I'm almost done. But now, now that I'm looking at everything, I'm having a change of heart. Maybe it's not a good idea to make this monster a bride. What if they both hate humans? And then, oh my god, there's 2 of them that we're gonna have to defeat. And I can't bring myself to do that. So he looks his monster in the eye for the window and he starts ripping up the bride corpse. Me personally, I would have just, sunk cost fallacy finished it. The monster obviously very upset and he's like, I hope you have a good wedding. I'm gonna make sure you regret this moment for the rest of your life. I'm gonna make it hell. I'm gonna make you as miserable as I am. And then he rows off in a boat. And Victor Frankenstein's like, oh my god, he's gonna kill me at my own wedding. I don't think that's what's gonna happen. But we'll see. We are getting close to the end of the book. Maybe he does just kill Victor Frankenstein. And then the monster marries Elizabeth. What a rug pull that would be. Imagine if Victor Frankenstein goes back to England. He's getting ready to get married. The monster kills and marries his wife. I'd pay to see that ending, but I don't think that is the ending that we're gonna get. But we're just gonna start. I feel like I could pad out the beginning a little bit longer. But I would like to read. I'm kind of excited. I'm kind of excited now that we're getting towards the end. I feel like we might just have one more stream of this, because I think I can get through half of what we've got left today, and then the other half will be tomorrow. Because we usually get through like 10 pages or so. Actually, this is only part 8, and we're at 168. 168 divided by 8. We get through about 20 pages. I'm gonna double check that. I don't trust my math. See, I'm padding out time to let people trickle in now. I was doing just 160, so 160 divided by 8. That's 20. Yeah. Oh my god, I can do math. I hope you guys are proud of me. Oh, we got purple. He's blending in. Look, we got camouflage Muppet. It's like he's not even there. He's just hanging out. You can like only see his feet because it's a slightly different color. And hello, Alexander. Welcome in. Kirby's assemble. Do I have Kirby in the stream avatars? I might. I don't see any yet. How goes the story? We're just about to start. For anyone who's curious where we are, I don't know in later copies what page or chapter this would be, but this is the Penguins Classics 1818 text version. We are on volume 3, Chapter 4. I'm gonna take a drink. I made the mistake of having an ice cream before this, so hopefully my voice isn't gonna be too messed up by the dairy. The first version, I do kind of regret getting the first version though, because occasionally there will just be a spelling mistake. There'll be, like an old English kind of like spelling that just looks like a spelling mistake, and it catches me off guard every single time because I just have to like read it twice to be like, what is this? Am I crazy? Is this a word I don't know? And it's like, no, it's just old English. Oh, okay. Chapter 4. I was soon introduced into the presence of the magistrate. Oh my god, sorry, on the recap I forgot something really important. At the end of the last chapter, as Victor Frankenstein's going to meet up with Clerval, he lands on a Scottish... No. Yes? I think Scottish beach. And there's a bunch of townsfolk there, and they pretty much arrest him and accuse him of murder. Man has been boating all night, just got there, and everyone's like, you sicken me. Murderer. So that's what's going on. Okay. I was soon introduced into the presence of the magistrate, an old benevolent man with calm and mild manners. He looked upon me, however, with some degree of severity, and then, turning towards my conductors, he asked who appeared as a witness on this occasion. About half a dozen men came forward, one being selected by the magistrate. He deposed that he had been out fishing the night before with his son and brother-in-law, Daniel Nugent, when, about 10 o'clock, they observed a strong northerly blast rising, and they accordingly put in for port. It was a very dark night, as the moon had not yet risen. They did not land at the harbour, but, as they had been accustomed, a creek about 2 miles below. He walked on first, carrying a part of the fishing tackle, and his companions followed him at some distance. As he was proceeding along the sands, he struck his foot against something and fell all his length onto the ground. His companions came up to assist him, and by the light of the lantern, they had found he had fallen on the body of a man who was, to all appearances, dead. Their first supposition was that it was the corpse of some person who had been drowned or was thrown to shore by the waves, but upon examination, they found that the clothes were not wet, and even that the body was not then cold. They instantly carried it into the cottage of an old woman near the spot and endeavoured, but in vain, to restore it to life. He appeared to be a handsome young man, about 5 and 20 years of age. He had apparently been strangled, for there was no sign of any violence, except the black mark of fingers on his neck. The first part of this deposition did not in the least interest me, but when the mark of the fingers was mentioned, I remembered the murder of my brother and felt myself extremely agitated. My limbs trembled, and a mist came over my eyes, which obliged me to lean on a chair for support. The magistrate observed me with a keen eye, and of course drew an unfavourable augury from my manner. The son confirmed his father's account, but when Daniel Nugent was called, he swore positively that just before the fall of his companion, he saw a boat with a single man in it, and a short distance from shore, and, as far as he could judge by the light of a few stars, it was the same boat in which I had just landed. The woman deposed that she had lived near the beach, and was standing at the door of her cottage waiting for the return of the fishermen, about an hour before she heard of the discovery of the body, when she saw the boat, with only one man in it, push off from that part of the shore where the corpse was afterwards found. Another woman confirmed the account of the fishermen having brought the body into her house. It was not cold. They put it into a bed and rubbed it, and Daniel went into town for an apothecary, but life was quite gone. Several other men were examined concerning my landing, and they agreed that, with the strong north wind that had risen during the night, it was very probable that I had beaten about for many hours, and had been obliged to return nearly to the same spot from which I had departed. Besides, They observed that it appeared that I had brought the body from another place, and it was likely that, as I did not appear to know the shore, I might have put into harbour ignorant of the distance of the town from that place of which I deposited the corpse. Mr. Kerwin, on hearing this evidence, desired that I should be taken into the room where the body lay for interment, that it might be observed what effect the sight of it would produce upon me. The idea was probably suggested by the extreme agitation I had exhibited when the mode of the murder had been described. I was accordingly conducted by the magistrate and several other persons to the inn. I could not help being struck by the strange coincidences that had taken place during this eventful night, but, knowing that I had been conversing with several persons on the island that I inhabited about the time the body had been found, I was perfectly tranquil as to the consequences of the affair. I entered the room where the corpse lay and was led up to the coffin. How can I describe my sensations on beholding it? I feel yet parched with horror, nor can I reflect on that terrible moment without shuddering in agony that faintly reminds me of the anguish of the recognition. The trial, the presence of the magistrate and witness passed like a dream from my memory when I saw the lifeless form of Henry Clerval stretched before me. I gasped for breath, and, throwing myself on the body, I exclaimed, "Have my murderous machinations deprived you also, my dearest Henry, of life? 2 I have already destroyed. Other victims await their destiny, but you, Clerval, my friend, my benefactor." So sorry for giving Frankenstein that voice. The human frame could no longer support the agonizing suffering that I endured, and I was carried out of the room in strong convulsions. A fever succeeded to this. I lay for 2 months on the point of death. My ravings, as I afterward heard, were frightful. I called myself the murderer of William, of Justine, and of Clerval. Sometimes I entreated my attendants to assist me in the destruction of the fiend by whom I was tormented, and, at others, I felt the fingers of the monster already grasping my neck, and screamed aloud with agony and terror. Fortunately, as I spoke my native language, Mr. Kerwin alone understood me, but my gestures and bitter cries were sufficient to affright the other witnesses. Why did I not die? More miserable than man ever was before, why did I not sink into forgetfulness and rest? Death snatches away many blooming children, and only hopes of their donating parents. How many brides and youthful lovers have been one day in bloom of health and hope, and the next a prey for worms and the decay of the tomb? Of what materials was I made, that I could resist so many shocks, which, like the turning of the wheel, continually renewed the torture? But I was doomed to live, and, in 2 months, found myself, as awakening from a dream, in a prison stretched on a wretched bed, surrounded by gaolers, turnkeys, bolts, and all the miserable apparatus of a dungeon. It was morning, I remember, when I thus awoke to an understanding. I had forgotten the particulars of what had happened, and only felt as if some great misfortune had suddenly overwhelmed me. For when I looked around, and saw the barred windows, and the squalidness of the room which I was in, all flashed across my memory. I groaned bitterly. This sound disturbed an old woman who was sleeping in a chair beside me. She was a hired nurse, the wife of one of the turnkeys, and her countenance expressed all those bad qualities which often characterize that class. The lines on her face were hard and rude, like that of a person accustomed to see without sympathizing in the sights of misery. Her tone expressed her entire indifference. She addressed me in English, and the voice struck me as one that I had heard during my sufferings. "Are you better now, sir?" she said. I replied in the same language with a feeble voice. "I believe I am. But if all is to be true, if indeed I did not dream, I am sorry that I am still alive to feel this misery and horror." "For that matter," replied the old woman, "if you mean the gentleman you murdered, I believe that it was better for you—" I'm turning Scottish, and she's I'll deal with it. I believe that it were better if you were dead, for I fancy it will go hard with you. But you will be hung when the next season comes. However, that's none of my business. I'm sent to nurse you and get you well and do my duty with a safe conscience. If we're well, if everybody did the same. I turned with loathing from the woman who could utter so unfeeling a speech to a person just saved, on the edge of death. But I felt languid and unable to reflect on all that had passed. The whole series of my life appeared to me as a dream. I sometimes doubted if indeed it were all true, for it never presented itself to my mind with the force of reality. As the images floated before me became more distinct, I grew feverish. A darkness pressed around me. No one was near me who soothed me with a gentle voice of love. No dear hand supported me. The physician came and prescribed medicines, and the old woman prepared them for me. But utter carelessness was visible in the first, and the expression of brutality was strongly marked in the visage of the second. Who could be interested in the fate of a murderer but the hangman who would gain his fee? These were my first reflections, but I soon learned that Mr. Kerwin had shown me extreme kindness. He had caused the best room in the prison to be prepared for me. Wretched indeed was the best, and it was he who provided a physician and a nurse. It is true, he seldom came to see me, for, although he ardently desired to relieve the sufferings of every human creature, he did not wish to be present at the agonies and miserable ravings of a murderer. He came, therefore, sometimes to see that I was not neglected, but his visits were short and at long intervals. One day when I was gradually recovering, I was seated in a chair, my eyes half open, and my cheeks livid like those in death. I was overcome by gloom and misery, and often reflected that I had better seek death than remain miserably pent up, only to be let loose in a world replete with wretchedness. At one time I considered whether I should not declare myself guilty, and suffer the penalties of law less innocent than poor Justine had been. Such were my thoughts when the door of my apartment was opened, and Mr. Kerwin entered. His countenance expressed sympathy and compassion. He drew a chair close to mine and addressed me in French. "I fear that this place is very shocking to you. Can I do anything to make you more comfortable?"
"I thank you, but all that you mention is nothing to me. On the whole earth there is no comfort which I am capable of receiving."
"I know that the sympathy of a stranger can be but of little relief to one borne down as you are so strange a misfortune, but you will, I hope, soon quit this melancholy abode, for doubtless evidence can easily be brought to free you from this criminal charge." I'm gonna take a quick drink break because we're only halfway through this. This is a long chapter. Rip Clerval.
This is my least concern. I am, by a course of strange events, the most miserable of mortals, persecuted and tortured as I am, and have been. Can death be any evil to me?
Nothing indeed can be more unfortunate and agonizing than the strange chances that have lately occurred. You were thrown, by some surprising accident, on this shore, renowned for its hospitality, seized immediately, and charged with murder. The first sight that was presented to your eyes was the body of your friend, murdered in so unaccountable a manner, and placed, as it were, by some fiend across your path. As Mr. Kerwin said this, notwithstanding the agitation I endured on this retrospect of my sufferings, I also felt considerable surprise at the knowledge he seemed to possess concerning me. I suppose some astonishment was exhibited to my countenance, for Mr. Kerwin hastened to say, "It was not until a day or two after your illness that I thought of examining your dress, and I might discover some trace by which I could send your relations to an account of your misfortune and illness. I found several letters, and among others, one which I discovered from its commencement to be from your father. I instantly wrote to Geneva. Nearly 2 months have elapsed since the departure of my letter, but you are ill. Even now you tremble. You are unfit for agitation of any kind.
The suspense is 1,000 times more worse than the most horrible event. Tell me what new scene of death has been acted, and whose murder I am now to lament.
Your family is perfectly well, said Mr. Kerwin, with gentleness, and someone, a friend, is come to visit you. I know not by what chain of thought the idea presented itself, but it instantly darted to my mind that the murderer had come to mock at my misery, and taunt me with the death of Clerval, as a new incitement for me to comply with its hellish desires. I put my hand before my eyes and cried out in agony, "No, take him away! I cannot see him, for God's sake, do not let him enter!" Mr. Kerwin regarded me with a troubled countenance. He could not help regarding my exclamation as a presumption of my guilt, and said in a rather severe tone, "I should have thought, young man, that the presence of your father would have been welcome, instead of inspiring such a violent repugnance."
"My father?"
cried I, with every feature and muscle was relaxed from anguish to pleasure.
"Is my father indeed come? How kind, how very kind! But where is he? Why does he not hasten to me?"
My change of manner surprised and pleased the magistrate. Perhaps he thought that my former exclamation was a momentary return of delirium, and now he instantly resumed his former benevolence. He rose and quitted the room with my nurse, and in a moment my father entered it. Nothing, at this moment, could have given me greater pleasure than the arrival of my father. I stretched out my hand to him and cried, "Are you safe, then? And Elizabeth? And Ernest?" My father calmed me with assurances of their welfare, and endeavoured, by dwelling on these subjects, so interesting to my heart, to raise my desponding spirits, and he soon felt that a prison cannot be the abode of cheerfulness.
"What place is this that you inhabit, my son?"
said he, looking mournfully at the barred windows and wretched appearance of my room.
"You travelled to seek happiness, but a fatality seems to pursue you. Poor Clerval."
The name of my unfortunate and murdered friend was an agitation too great to be endured in my weak state. I shed tears.
"Alas, yes, my father," replied I. "Some destiny of the most horrid kind hangs over me, and I must live to fulfill it, or surely I should have died on the same coffin of Henry."
We were not allowed to converse for any length of time, for the precarious state of my health rendered every precaution necessary that could ensure tranquillity. Mr. Kerwin came in and insisted that my strength should not be exhausted by too much exertion. But the appearance of my father was to me like that of a good angel, and I gradually recovered my health. As my sickness quitted me, I was absorbed by a gloomy and black melancholy that nothing could dissipate. The image of Clerval was forever before me, ghastly and murdered. Sorry, cat's going crazy. Then once the agitation into which these reflections threw me made my friends dredge a dangerous relapse. Alas, why did they preserve so miserable and a detested life? It was surely that I might fulfill my destiny, which was now drawing to a close. Soon, oh, very soon, will death extinguish these throbbings and relieve me from the mighty weight of anguish that bears me to dust. And, in executing the award of justice, I shall also sink to rest. Then, the appearance of death was distant, although the wish was ever present to my thoughts, and I often sat for hours motionless and speechless, wishing for some mighty revolution that might bury me, and my destroyer, in its ruins. The seizure of the assizes approached. I had already been 3 months in prison, and although I was still weak and in continual danger of a relapse, I was obliged to travel nearly 100 miles to the country town where the court was held. Mr. Kerwin charged himself with every care of collecting witnesses and arranging for my defense. I was spared the disgrace of appearing publicly as a criminal, as the case was not brought before the court that decides on life and death. The grand jury rejected the bill, on its being proved that I was only on the Orkney Islands, for at the hour the body of my friend was found, and a fortnight after my removal I was liberated from prison. My father was enraptured on finding me freed from the vexations of criminal charge, and I was again allowed to breathe the fresh atmosphere, and allowed to return to my native country. I did not participate in these feelings. For to me, the walls of a dungeon, or a palace, were alike hateful. The cup of life was poisoned forever, and although the sun shone upon me, as upon the happiest and gay of heart, I saw around me nothing but a dense and frightful darkness, penetrated by no light but the glimmer of 2 eyes that glared upon me. Sometimes they were the expressive eyes of Henry, languishing in death, and the dark orbs nearly covered by the lids, and the long black lashes that fringed them. Sometimes it was the watery, clouded eyes of the monster, as I first saw them in my chamber in Ingolstadt. My father tried to awaken in me the feelings of affection. He talked of Geneva, which I should soon visit, of Elizabeth and Ernest, but these words only drew deep groans from me. Sometimes, indeed, I felt a wish for happiness, and thought with melancholy delight of my beloved cousin, or longed with a devouring malady du pays to see once more the blue lakes and rapid Rhone that had been so dear to me in early childhood. But my general state of feeling was a torpor, in which a prison was a welcome residence, as the divinest scene of nature, and these fits were seldom interrupted, but by paroxysms of anguish and despair. At these moments, I often endeavoured to put an end to the existence I loathed, and it required unceasing intention and vigilance to restrain me from committing some dreadful act of violence. I remembered as I quitted prison, I heard one of the men say,
"He may be innocent of this murder, but he has certainly a bad conscience."
These words struck me. A bad conscience? Yes, surely I had one. William, Justine, and Clerval had died through my infernal machinations.
"And whose death?"
"And whose death," cried I, "is to finish the tragedy. Ah, my father, do not remain in this wretched country. Take me where I may forget myself and existence and all the world."
My father easily acceded to my desire, and having taken the leave of Mr. Kerwin, we hastened to Dublin. I felt as if I was relieved of a heavy weight when the packet sailed with fair wind from Ireland, and I had quitted for ever the country which had been to me the scene of so much misery. It was midnight. My father slept in the cabin. I lay on the deck looking at the stars and listening to the dashing of the waves. I hailed the darkness that shut Ireland from my sight, and my pulse beat with a feverish joy, which I reflected that I should soon see Geneva. The past appeared to me in the light of a frightful dream, yet the vessel in which I was, the wind that blew me from the detested shore of Ireland, and the sea which surrounded me, told me too forcibly that I was deceived by no vision, and that Clerval, my friend and dearest companion, had fallen a victim to me and the monster of my creation. I repassed in my memory my whole life, my quiet happiness while residing with my family in Geneva, and the death of my mother, and my departure to Ingolstadt. I remembered shuddering at the mad enthusiasm that hurried me onto the creation of my hideous enemy, and I called to mind the night during which he first lived. I was unable to pursue the train of thought. 1,000 feelings pressed upon me, and I wept bitterly. Ever since my recovery from the fever, I had been in the custom of taking every night a small quantity of laudanum, for it was by the means of this drug only that I was enabled to gain the rest necessary for the preservation of life. Opposed by the recollection of my various misfortunes, I now took a double dose, and soon slept profoundly, for sleep did not afford me respite from the thought and misery. My dreams presented 1,000 objects that scared me. Towards morning I possessed by a kind of nightmare. I felt the fiend's grasp in my neck, and I could not free myself from it. Groans and cries rung in my ears. My father, who was watching over me, perceiving my restlessness, awoke me, and pointed to the port of Holyhead, which we were now entering. End of chapter 4. Oh, yeah, the ball closing its eyes. Yeah, that's unfortunately just what happens when you're looking down too much. I feel it happens a lot on art streams too. Oh my god, look with the minion drip. I didn't know he had fashion like that. I was racing around during part of that reading as well. That was a very long chapter. Oof. Took us a good chunk. Took us probably like 20 minutes to get through that chapter. And papoy, banana. Banana papoy. Oh my god. Thank you so much for the resub block in 7 months. Holy moly. And also, I like how the text is so small. The text isn't supposed to be that small. Actually, it's looking like there's not even text. I don't know what's happened to my alerts. I'd say I will fix that soon, but we're getting brand new brand new alerts in like a month or so. So I'm like, I don't know why those are busted, but do I fix it? I don't know. But thank you so much for the follow. They're anonymous, so keep your name a secret, but thank you. Oh my goodness. It's hard for me. Obviously, like, I feel sympathy for Victor. It's hard for me to feel complete pity, though. Because, again, like, a lot of it is his own doing. And I think if he didn't run away from his, you know, his son, you know, none of this probably would have happened. But I get it. But also I don't, because he spent months working on that thing, so I don't know why you're suddenly scared now that it's alive and doing the exact thing you wanted it to do. That's never here. I think it's just because I feel more sympathy towards the monster, that even though the monster is kind of, you know, killing people, I feel more sympathy because the monster tried. He tried very hard to be a good person, but no one let him. I don't know. It's probably one of those things where there's like no correct answer. You know, every party's got some fault. I'm Team Monster though. You know, in Twilight, you got Team Edward, Team Jacob. I'm Team Monster in Frankenstein. When I say Frankenstein, I mean the monster. Okay, I'm gonna have a drink and then we're gonna get into chapter 5. Doing jaw stretches. I forgot to do my tongue twisters before stream, so I apologize. I'm tripping over words a bit. We'd resolved not to go to London, but to cross the country by Portsmouth, and thence to embark to Havre. I preferred this plan principally because I had dreaded to see again those places which I had enjoyed a few moments of tranquillity with my beloved Clerval. I thought with horror of seeing those persons whom we had been accustomed to visit together, and who might make inquiries concerning an event, and that the very remembrance of which made me again feel the pang I endured when I gazed on his lifeless form in the innet. As for my father, his desires and exertions were bounded to the again seeing me restored to health and peace of mind. His tenderness and attentions were unremitting. My grief and gloom were obstinate, but he would not despair. Sometimes he thought that I felt deeply the degradation of being obliged to answer a charge of murder, and he endeavored to prove me the futility of pride.
Alas, my father, said I, how little do you know me. Human beings, their feelings and passions, would indeed be degraded if such a wretch as I felt pride. Justine, poor unhappy Justine, as was innocent as I, and she suffered the same charge. She died for it, and I am the cause of this. I murdered her, William, Justine, and Henry. They all died by my hands.
My father had often, during my imprisonment, heard me make the same assertion. When I thus accused myself, he sometimes seemed to desire an explanation, and at others he appeared to consider it as caused by delirium, and that during my illness, some idea of this kind presented itself to my imagination, the remembrance of which I preserved in my convalescence. I avoided explanation and maintained a continual silence concerning the wretch which I had created. I had a feeling that I should be supposed mad, and this forever chained my tongue. For when I would have given the whole world to have confided a fatal secret. Upon this occasion, my father said, with an expression of unbounded wonder,
"What do you mean, Victor? Are you mad? My dear son."
I'm going to hiccup just a sec. Okay.
"My dear son, I entreat you to never make such an assertion again."
"I am not mad," I cried energetically. "The sun in heavens, who have viewed my operations, can bear witness to the truth. I am the assassin of the most innocent victims, and they died by my machinations. 1,000 times would I have shed my own blood, drop by drop, to have saved their lives. But I could not, my father. Indeed, I could not sacrifice the whole human race."
The conclusion of this speech convinced my father that my ideas were deranged, and he instantly changed the subject of our conversation and endeavored to alter the course of my thoughts. He wished as much as possible to obliterate the memory of the scenes that had taken place in Ireland, and never alluded to them or suffered me to speak of my misfortunes. As time passed, I became more calm. Misery had her dwelling in my heart, but I could no longer talk in the same incoherent manner of my own crimes. Sufficient for me was the imperious voice of wretchedness, which sometimes desired to declare itself to the whole world, and my manners were calmer and more composed than they had ever been since my journey to the Sea of Ice. We arrived at Havre on the 8th of May, and instantly proceeded to Paris, where my father had some business, which detained us for a few weeks. In this city, I received the following letter from Elizabeth. "To Victor Frankenstein, my dearest friend. It gave me the greatest pleasure to receive a letter from my uncle dated in Paris. You are no longer a formidable distance, and I may hope to see you in less than a fortnight. My poor cousin, how much you must have suffered! I expect to see you looking even more ill than when you quitted Geneva. This winter has passed most miserably, tortured, as I have been anxious suspense. Yet I hope to see some peace in your countenance, and to find your heart is not totally devoid of comfort and tranquillity. Yet I fear that the same feelings now exist that made you so miserable a year ago, even perhaps augmented by time. I would not disturb you at this period, when so many misfortunes weigh upon you, but a conversation that I had with my uncle previous to his departure renders some explanation necessary before we meet." Wait, is this... Okay, this is still her. "Explanation, you may possibly say. What can Elizabeth have to explain? If you really say this, my questions are answered, and I have no more to do than to sign myself your affectionate cousin. But you are distant from me, and it is possible that you may have dread, and yet be pleased with this explanation. And, in the probability of this being the case, I dare not longer postpone writing that, during your absence, I have often wished to express to you, but have never had the courage to begin. You well know, Victor, that our union has been the favourite plan of your parents ever since infancy. We were taught this when we were young, and taught to look forward to it as an event that would certainly take place. We were affectionate playfellows during childhood, and, I believe, dear and valued friends to one another as we grew older. But brother and sister often entertain a lively affection towards each other, without desiring a more intimate union. May not such also be our case? Tell me, dearest Victor, answer me, I conjure you, by our mutual happiness, with simple truth. Do you not love another? You have travelled, you have spent several years of your life at Ingolstadt, and I confess to you, my friend, that when I saw you last autumn so unhappy, flying to solitude from the society of every creature, I could not help supposing that you might regret our connection, and believe yourself bound in order to fulfill the wishes of your parents, although they oppose themselves to your inclinations. But this is false reasoning. I confess to you, my cousin, that I love you, and that in my airy dreams of futurity, You have been my constant friend and companion. But is your happiness I desire as well as my own? When I declare to you that our marriage would render me eternally miserable, unless it were the dictate of your own free choice. Even now I weep to think, borne down as you are by the cruelest misfortunes, that you may stifle, by the word honor, all hope of that love and happiness which would alone restore you to yourself. I, who have so interested an affection for you, may increase your miseries tenfold by being an obstacle to your wishes. Ah, Victor, be assured that your cousin and playmate has too sincere a love for you not to be made miserable by this supposition. Be happy, my friend, and if you obey me in this one request, remain satisfied that nothing on earth will have the power to interrupt my tranquility. Do not let this letter disturb you. Do not answer it tomorrow, or the next day, or even until you come, if it will give you pain. My uncle will send me news of your health, and I see but one smile on your lips when we meet, occasioned by this or any other exertion of mine. I shall need no other happiness. Elizabeth Lavenza, Geneva, May 18th, 17. The letter revived in my memory what I had before forgotten, the threat of the fiend.
I will be with you on your wedding night.
Such was the sentence, and on that night would the demon employ every art to destroy me, to tear me from the glimpse of happiness which promised partly to console my sufferings. On that night he had determined to consummate his crimes by my death. Well, be it so. A deadly struggle would then assuredly take place, in which if he was victorious, I should be at peace, and his powers over me will be at an end. If he were vanquished, I should also be a free man. Alas, what freedom! Such as the peasant enjoys when his family has been massacred before his eyes, his cottage burnt, his lands laid to waste, and he has turned adrift, homeless, penniless, alone, but free. Such would be my liberty, except that in my Elizabeth I possessed a treasure, alas, balanced by those horrors of remorse and guilt which would pursue me until death. Sweet and beloved Elizabeth, I read and reread her letter, and some softened feelings stole into my heart, and dared to whisper paradisiacal dreams of joy and love. But the apple was already eaten, and the angel's arm bare to drive me from all hope. Yet I would die to make her happy. If the monster executed his threat, death was inevitable. Yet, again, I considered whether my marriage would hasten my fate. My destruction might indeed arrive a few months sooner, but if my torturers should suspect that I postponed it, influenced by his menaces, he would surely find another, and perhaps more dreadful means of revenge. He had vowed to be with me on my wedding night, yet he did not consider that threat as binding him to peace in the meantime, for, as if to show me that he is not yet satiated with blood, he had murdered Clerval immediately after the enunciation of his threats. I resolved thereafter that if my immediate union with my cousin should conduce either to her or my father's happiness, my adversary's designs against my life should not deter it a single hour. In this state of mind, I wrote to Elizabeth. My letter was a calm and affectionate.
I fear, my beloved girl, I said, little happiness remains for us on earth, yet all that I may one day enjoy is concentrated on you. Chase away your idle fears. To you alone do I consecrate my life, and my endeavors for contentment. I have one secret, Elizabeth, a dreadful one. When revealed to you, it will chill your frame with horror, and then, far from being surprised at my misery, you will only wonder that I survived what I endured. I will confide this tale of misery and terror to you the day after our marriage shall take place. For, my sweet cousin, there must be perfect confidence between us. But until then, I conjure you, do not mention or allude to it, that I most earnestly entreat. I know you will comply.
Yeah, all the baddies done his palace by how happy he is to marry his cousin. Yes.
In about a week after the arrival of Elizabeth's letter, we returned to Geneva. My cousin welcomed me with warm affections, yet tears were in her eyes as she beheld my emancipated frame and feverish cheeks. I saw a change in her also. She was thinner and had lost much of that heavenly vivacity that had before charmed me, but her gentleness and soft looks of compassion made her a more fit companion for one blasted and miserable as I was. The tranquility which I now enjoyed did not endure. Memory brought madness with it, and when I thought on what had passed, a real insanity possessed me. Sometimes I was furious and burnt with rage, sometimes low and despondent. I never spoke nor looked, but sat motionless, bewildered by the multitude of miseries that overcame me. Elizabeth alone had the power to draw me from these fits. Her gentle voice would soothe me when transported by passion, and inspire me with human feelings when sunk in torpor. She wept with me, and for me. When reason returned, she would remonstrate, and endeavor to inspire me with resignation. It is well for the unfortunate to be resigned, but for the guilty there is no peace. The agonies of remorse poison the luxury that is otherwise sometimes found in indulging the excess of grief. Soon after my arrival, my father spoke of my immediate marriage with my cousin. I remained silent.
Have you then some other attachment?
None on earth. I love Elizabeth, and look forward to our union with delight. Let the day therefore be fixed, and on it I will consecrate myself, in life or death, to the happiness of my cousin. My dear Victor, do not speak thus. Heavy misfortunes have befallen us, but let us only cling closer to what remains, and transfer our love for those whom we have lost to those who yet live. Our circle will be small, but bound close by the ties of affection and mutual misfortune. When the time shall have softened your despair, new and dear objects of care will be born to replace those of whom we have so cruelly been deprived. Such were the lessons of my father.
Sorry, that was his dad speaking, not Elizabeth.
Such were the lessons of my father, but to me the remembrance of that threat returned. Nor can you wonder that, omnipotent as the fiend had yet been in his deeds of blood, I should also regard him as invincible, and that when he had pronounced the words,
"I shall be with you on your wedding night,"
I should regard the threatened fate as unavoidable. But death was no evil to me, if the loss of Elizabeth were balanced with it. I therefore, with a contented and even cheerful countenance, agreed with my father that if my cousin would consent, the ceremony should take place in 10 days, and thus put, as I imagined, the seal to my fate. Great God! If for one instant I had thought what might be the hellish intention of my fiendish adversary, I would rather have banished myself forever from my native country, and wandered a friendless outcast over the earth, than have consented to this miserable marriage. But, as if possessed by the magic powers, the monster had blinded me to his real intentions. And when I thought that I prepared only for my own death, I hastened that of a far dearer victim. As the period fixed for our marriage drew nearer, whether from cowardice or prophetic feeling, I felt my heart sink within me, but I concealed my feelings by an appearance of hilarity that brought smiles and joys to the countenance of my father, but hardly deceived the ever-watchful eye of Elizabeth. She looked forward to our union with placid contentment, not unmingled with a little fear, which past misfortunes had impressed, that what now appeared certain intangible happiness might soon dissipate into an airy dream that leaves no trace but deep and everlasting regret. Preparations were made for the event, congratulatory visits were received, and all wore a smiling appearance. I shut up, as well as I could, in my own heart, to the anxiety that preyed there, and entered with seeming earnestness into the plans of my father.
although they might only serve as decorations of my tragedy. A house was purchased for us near Coligny, by which we should enjoy the pleasures of the country, and yet be so near Geneva as to see my father every day, who would still reside within the walls, for the behalf of Ernest, that he might follow his studies at the school. In the meantime, I took every precaution to defend my person, in case the fiend should openly attack me. I carried pistols and a dagger constantly about me, and was ever on the watch to prevent artifice, and by these means gained a greater degree of tranquillity. Indeed, as the period approached, the threat appeared more as a delusion, not to be regarded as worthy to disturb my peace, while the happiness I hoped for in my marriage wore a greater appearance of certainty as the day fixed for its solemnization drew nearer, and I heard it continually spoken of as an occurrence which no accident could possibly prevent. Elizabeth seemed happy, but my tranquil demeanour contributed greatly to calm her mind. But on the day that was to fulfill my wishes and my destiny, she was melancholy, and at the presentiment of evil pervaded her, and perhaps she also thought of the dreadful secret which I had promised to reveal to her the following day. My father was in the meantime overjoyed, and in the bustle of preparation only observed the melancholy of his niece, the difference of a bride. After the ceremony was performed, a large party assembled at my father's, but it was agreed that Elizabeth and I should pass the afternoon and night at Evian, and return to Coligny the next morning. As the day was fair and the wind was favourable, we resolved to go by water. Those were the last moments of my life during which I enjoyed the feeling of happiness. We passed rapidly along. The sun was hot, but we were sheltered by its rays by a kind of canopy, and while we enjoyed the beauty of the scene, sometimes on one side of the lake, where we saw Mount Selve, the pleasant banks of the Montalgre, at a distance, surmounting it all the beautiful Mont Blanc, and the assemblage of the snowy mountains in the vain endeavour to emulate her. Sometimes coasting the opposite banks, we saw the mighty Jura opposing its dark side to the ambition that would quit its native country, and an almost insurmountable barrier to the invader who should wish to enslave it. I took the hand of Elizabeth. "You are sorrowful, my love. Ah, if you knew what I had suffered, and what I yet may endure, you would endeavour to let me taste the quiet and freedom of despair that one day at least permits me to enjoy." "Be happy, my dear Victor," replied Elizabeth. "There is, I hope, nothing to distress you, and be assured that if a lively joy is not painted in my face, my heart is contented. Something whispers to me not to depend too much on the prospect that is open before us, but I will not listen to such a sinister voice. Observe how fast we move along, and how the clouds, which sometimes obscure and sometimes rise above the dome of Mont Blanc, render the scene of beauty still more interesting. Look also at the innumerable fish that are swimming in the clear water. We can distinguish every pebble that lies at the bottom. What a divine day! How happy and serene all nature appears!" Thus Elizabeth endeavoured to divert her thoughts and mine from all reflection upon melancholy subjects, but her temper was fluctuating. Joy for a few instances shone in her eyes, but it continually gave place to distraction and reverie. The sun sunk lower in the heavens as we passed the river Drance and observed its path through the chasms of the higher and the glens of the lower hills. The Alps here came closer to the lake, and we approached the amphitheatre of the mountains which formed its eastern boundary. The spire of the Evian shone under the woods which surrounded it, and the range of the mountain by which it was overhung. The wind, which had hitherto carried us along with amazing rapidity, sunk at sunset to a light breeze. The soft air just ruffled the water, and caused a pleasant motion among the trees as we approached the shore, from which it wafted the most delightful scent of flowers and hay. The sun sunk beneath the horizon as we landed, and as I touched shore, I felt those cares and fears revive, which soon were to clasp me and cling to me forever. Chapter end. Okay, this next chapter is a little bit long too, so we might leave it here today. Oof. We've got to, oh my god, the chapter after that is a doozy. I think we just have like 2 chapters left. But I think chapter 8 starts at 195 and goes all the way to this is so long. Maybe we should push through this so then we can just do the last chapter, because I think the last chapter itself is, it goes from 195 to 215. The last one itself is like 20 pages. We get through about 20 pages a stream. All right, we'll push through it. We'll push through it. I just got a message. I think Tisha just started To Be Hero X. I got a message about it. She's saying it's pain. You know what? It kind of is. I'm leaking messages. I'm as bad as who I was chastising for it before. Okay, I'm gonna take a bit drink. I might do like a tongue twister before we start. Betty bought some butter, but she thought the butter made her batter bitter. I don't remember that one very much. It's fun to do. She sells seashells by the seashore. Red lover, yellow lover, red lover, yellow lover. I probably could mute to do this, but you know, you get to be here with me for it. Okay. A drink, then chapter 6. It was 8 o'clock when we landed. We walked for a short time on the shore, enjoying the transitionary light, and then retired to the inn and contemplated the lovely scenes of water, woods, and mountains. Hiccup. Obscured in darkness, yet still displaying their black outlines. The wind, which had fallen in the south, now rose with a great violence in the west. The moon had reached her summit in the heavens, and was beginning to descend. The clouds swept across it swifter than the flight of the vulture, and dimmed her rays, while the lake reflected the scene of the busy heavens, rendered still busier by the restless waves which were beginning to rise. Suddenly, a heavy storm of rain descended. I had been calm during the day, but so soon as night obscured the shapes and objects, 1,000 fears arose in my mind. I was anxious and watchful, while my right hand grasped a pistol that was hidden in my bosom. Every sound terrified me, but I resolved that I would sell my life dearly and not relax the impending conflict until my own life, or that of my adversary, were extinguished. Elizabeth observed my agitation for some time in timid and fearful silence, and at length she said, "What is it that agitates you, my dear Victor? What is it that you fear?"
"Oh, peace, peace, my love," replied I. "This night and all will be safe, but this night is dreadful, very dreadful."
I passed an hour in this state, when I suddenly reflected how dreadful the combat which I momentarily expected would be to my wife, and I earnestly entreated her to retire, resolving not to join her until I obtained some knowledge as to the situation of my enemy. She left me, and I continued some time walking up and down the passages of the house, inspecting every corner that might afford a retreat to my adversary. But I discovered no trace of him. I was beginning to conjecture that some fortunate chance had intervened to present to the execution of his menaces, when I suddenly heard a shrill and dreadful scream. It came from the room into which Elizabeth had retired. As soon as I heard it, the whole truth rushed into my mind, and my arms dropped. The motion of every muscle and fibre was suspended. I could feel the blood trickling in my veins and tingling in the extremities of my limbs. The state lasted but for an instant. As the scream was repeated, I rushed into the room. Great God! Why did I not then expire? Why am I here to relate the destruction of the best hope and the purest creature of earth? She was there, lifeless and inanimate, thrown across the bed, her head hanging down and her pale and distorted features half covered by her hair. Everywhere I turn, I see the same figure, her bloodless arms and relaxed form flung by the murderer on its bridal bier. Could I behold this and live? Alas! Life is obstinate and clings closest where it is most hated. For a moment, only then did I lose recollection. I fainted. When I recovered, I found myself surrounded by the people of the inn. Their countenances expressed a breathless terror, but the horrors of the others appeared only as mockery, a shadow of the feelings that oppressed me. I escaped from them to the room where the body lay of Elizabeth, my love, my wife, so lately living, so dear, so worthy. She'd been moved from the posture in which I had first beheld her, and now, as she lay, her head upon her arm, and a handkerchief thrown across her face and neck, I might have supposed her asleep. I rushed towards her and embraced her with ardor, but the deathly languor and coldness of the limbs told me that what I now held in my arms had ceased to be Elizabeth, whom I had loved and cherished. The murderous mark of the fiend's grasp was on her neck, and the breath had ceased to issue from her lips. While I still hung over her in the agony of despair, I happened to look up. The windows of the room had before darkened, and I felt a kind of panic on seeing the pale yellow moonlight illuminate the chamber. The shutters had been thrown back, and, with a sensation of horror not to be described, I saw at the open window a figure of the most hideous and abhorred. A grin was on the face of the monster. He seemed to jeer, as with his fiendish finger he pointed towards the corpse of my wife. I rushed to the window, and drawing a pistol from my bosom, shot. But he eluded me, leaped from his station, and running with the swiftness of lightning, plunged into the lake. The report of the pistol brought a crowd into the room. I pointed to the spot where he had disappeared, and we followed the tracks with boats, nets were cast, but in vain. After passing several hours, we returned hopeless, most of my companions believing it to have been a form conjured by my fancy. After having landed, they proceeded to search the country, parties going in different directions among the woods and vines. I did not accompany them. I was exhausted. A film covered my eyes, and my skin was parched with the heat of fever. In this state, I lay on a bed, hardly conscious of what had happened. My eyes wandered around the room, as if to seek something that I had lost. At length, I remembered that my father would anxiously expect the return of Elizabeth and myself, and that I must return alone. The reflection brought tears into my eyes, and I wept for a long time. But my thoughts rambled to various subjects, reflecting on my misfortunes and their cause. I was bewildered in a cloud of wonder and horror. The death of William, the execution of Justine, the murder of Clerval, and lastly, my wife. Even at the moment, I knew not that my only remaining friends was safe from the malignity of the fiend. My father even now might be writhing under his grasp, and Ernest might be dead at his feet. The idea made me shudder, and recalled me to action. I started up, and resolved to return to Geneva with all possible speed. There were no horses to be procured, and I must return by the lake, but the wind was unfavourable, and the rain fell in torrents. However, it was hardly morning, and I might reasonably hope to arrive by night. I had hired men to row, and took an oar myself, for I had always experienced relief from mental torment and bodily exercise. But the overwhelming misery I now felt, and the excess of agitation that I endured, rendered me incapable of any exertion. I threw down an oar, and leaning my head upon my hands, gave way to an ever-gloomy idea that arose. If I looked up, I saw the scenes which were familiar to me in my happier time, which I had contemplated but the day before in the company of her, who was now but a shadow and a recollection. Tears streamed from my eyes. The rain had ceased for a moment. I saw a fish play in the waters as they had done a few hours before. They had been observed by Elizabeth. Nothing is so painful to the human mind as a great and sudden change. The sun might shine, or the clouds might lower, but nothing could appear to me as it had done the day before. A fiend had snatched from me every hope of future happiness. No creature had ever been so miserable as I was, so frightful an event is single in history of man. But why should I dwell on the incidents that followed this last overwhelming event? Mine had been a tale of horrors. I reached their acme, and what I must now relate can but be tedious to you. Know that one by one, my friends were snatched away. I was left desolate. My own strength is exhausted, and I must tell, in a few words, what remains of my hideous narration. I arrived at Geneva. My father and Ernest yet lived, but the former sunk under the tidings that I bore. I see him now, excellent and venerable old man. His eyes wandered in vacancy. They had lost their charm and delight. His niece, his more than daughter, whom he had donated on with all the affection which a man feels, who, in the decline of life, having few affections, clings more earnestly to those that remain. Cursed be the fiend that brought misery on his grey hairs, and doomed him to waste in wretchedness. He could not live under the horrors that were accumulated around him. A apoplectic fit was brought on, and in a few days he died in my arms. What then became of me? I know not. I lost sensation, and chains, and darkness were the only objects pressed upon me. Sometimes, indeed, I dreamt that I wandered in flowery meadows and pleasant vales with my friends of the youth, but awoke and found myself in a dungeon. Melancholy followed, but by degrees I gained a clearer conception of my miseries and situation, and was then released from my prison. They had called me mad, and during many months, as I understood, a solitary cell had been my habitation. But liberty had been a useless gift to me. As I awakened to reason, at the same time awakened to revenge, as memory of past misfortunes pressed upon me, I began to reflect on their cause, the monster whom I had created, the miserable demon whom I had sent aboard into the world for my destruction. I was possessed by a maddening rage when I thought of him, and desired and ardently prayed that I might have him within my grasp to wreak a great and signal revenge on this cursed head. Nor did my hate long confine itself to useless wishes. I began to reflect on the best means of securing him, and for this purpose, about a month after my release, I repaired to a criminal judge in the town and told him that I had an accusation to make, that I knew the destroyer of my family, and I required him to exert his whole authority for the apprehension of the murderer. The magistrate listened to me with attention and kindness.
"Be assured, sir," said he, "no pains or exertions on my part shall be spared to discover the villain." "Thank you," replied I. "Listen, therefore, to the deposition that I have to make. It is indeed a tale so strange that I should fear you would not credit it, were that not something in truth which, however wonderful, forces conviction. The story is too connected to be mistaken for a dream, and I have no motive for falsehood." My manner, as I thus addressed him, was impressive but calm. I had formed in my own heart a resolution to pursue my destroyer to death, and this purpose quieted my agony and provisionally reconciled me to life. I now related my history briefly, but with a firmness and precision, marking the dates with accuracy, and never deviating into invective or exclamation. The magistrate appeared at first perfectly incredulous, but as I continued, he became more attentive and interested. I saw him sometimes shudder with horror, at others a lively surprise, unmingled with disbelief, was painted on his countenance. When I had concluded my narration, I said, "This is the being who I accuse, and for whom detection and punishment I call upon you to exert your whole power. It is your duty as a magistrate, and I believe and hope that your feelings as man will not revolt from the execution of those functions on this occasion." This address caused a considerable change in the
me of my auditor. He heard my story with half kind of belief that is given to tales of spirits and supernatural events. But when he was called upon to act officially in consequence, the whole tide of his incredulity returned. He, however, answered mildly, I would willingly afford you every aid in your pursuit, but the creature of whom you speak appears to have powers that would put all my exertions into defiance. Who can follow an animal which can traverse the sea of ice and inhabit the caves and dens where no man should venture to intrude? Besides, the voices go on places. Some months have elapsed since the commission of his crimes, and no one can conjecture to what place he has wandered, or what region he may now inhabit. I do not doubt that he hovers near a spot which I inhabit, and if he has indeed taken refuge in the Alps, he may be hunted like the chamois, and destroyed like a beast of prey. But I perceive your thoughts. Do not credit my narrative, and do not intend to pursue my enemy with the punishment which is his desert. As I spoke, rage sparkled in my eyes. The magistrate was intimidated. You're mistaken, he said. I will exert myself, and if it is in my power to seize the monster, be assured that he shall suffer punishment proportionate to his crimes. But I fear, from what you have yourselves described to be his properties, this will prove impractical, and that, while every proper measure is pursued, you may endeavor to make up your mind to be the disappointment.
That cannot be. But all I can say is that will be of little avail. My revenge is of no moment to you, yet, which I allow it to be a vice. I confess that it is devouring the only passion of my soul. My rage is unspeakable when I reflect that the murderer, whom I have turned loose upon society, still exists. You refuse my just demands, but I have one resource, and I devote myself, either in my life or death, to his destruction.
I trembled with excess agitation as I said this. There was a frenzy in my manner, and something I doubt not of that haughty fierceness which the meteors of old is said to have possessed. But to a Genevan magistrate, whose mind was occupied by far other ideas than those of devotion and heroism, this elevation of mind had much the appearance of madness. He endeavoured to soothe me as a nurse does a child, and reverted to my tale as the effects of delirium.
Man, I cried, how ignorant art thou in thy pride of wisdom! Cease! You do not know what it is you say!
I broke from the house angry and disturbed, and retired to meditate on some other mode of action. Chapter end. Whoa! That means next week. We only have one more chapter to do. Is it a doozy of a chapter? It is. It is a doozy of the chapter. It'll still be a whole stream for that, I think, but we're almost done, guys. And then something else, maybe. I don't know. That's scary. I don't know what we're doing after this. But thank you for hanging out while we Frankenstein it up. I'm gonna go see who else is like streaming and doing stuff. Who is up and about? Uh-oh, I unmuted Twitch. Scary. Who is about? Uh-oh. Not many people. Ruh-roh. Ah. Dang. Let's go. Oh. Dang. Every time I think of one, it's like they're playing a game that I don't want spoilers on. Or I know they have the auto clip player. So I'm like, oh, I can't do that. Why don't we? I'm gonna scurry and scatter you today. I'm gonna tell you to get out of my house and scurry and scatter. Next stream will probably be Friday evening, potentially. I think streams are going to be few and far between. We'll do more Final Fantasy on the weekend, definitely, but I think this is a slow week for me. My mental's not in the best place, so I think I'm just gonna take it a bit slower. Also, work is maybe my mental's in a bad place because of work. I think today there was like multiple moments where I was like hitting my head on the desk, so I think it's definitely just gonna be a slower week. But yeah, I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Scurry and scatter, get out of my house. Goodbye.